I packed the car on a Tuesday. I checked the oil, filled the tank, printed the directions even though my phone had GPS. Old habit. I like having paper in my hands when I'm nervous. I wasn't sure why I was nervous. My son had invited me. He called me himself, which he doesn't always do. Usually it's a text, sometimes nothing at all, and I learn about family plans through a photo posted somewhere online. But this time, he called. I was washing dishes when my phone rang, and I saw his name on the screen, and I actually dried my hands before I answered, like it was something formal, like I needed to be ready. He said, "Mom, we want you here for Thanksgiving this year." He said it just like that. Not a question, a statement. "We want you here." I said, "Are you sure?" Because I didn't want to assume. He said, "Of course I'm sure. We have the guest room made up. Drive down Wednesday. Stay through the weekend. The kids would love it." The kids. He has two: Marcus, who is 16, and Lily, who just turned 9. I hadn't seen them since Easter, and even then, it was only for an afternoon because my daughter-in-law Megan had a migraine, so we kept it short. I understood. Migraines are brutal. I get them too. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I live in Knoxville. My son Daniel lives in Nashville. It's 3 hours on a good day, a little longer if you hit traffic near Cookeville. I've driven it 100 times. Used to drive it every month when he first moved there, back when the kids were small and Megan still seemed happy to see me. That was several years ago now. I spent the weekend before Thanksgiving cooking. I made my pecan pie, the one Daniel grew up on, the one his grandmother taught me to make in her kitchen in 1987. I made a cranberry orange bread because Lily told me once, on a video call, that she liked anything orange flavored. I wrote that down. I keep a little notebook of things my grandchildren tell me they like, so I don't forget. So I can show up knowing something true about them. I wrapped everything carefully. Packed my nicest sweater, the burgundy one I bought last fall and hadn't worn yet. Packed my good slippers, my book, my blood pressure medication, my pillow from home because guest pillows are never quite right. I was on the road by 7 Wednesday morning. The drive was fine. Leaves were still holding on in patches along 40, oranges and deep reds, the kind of color that makes you feel like the world is trying to say something beautiful before it goes quiet for winter. I had the radio on, an oldies station out of Cookeville, and I sang along to things I hadn't thought about in 20 years. I felt light. I felt the way you feel when you're going somewhere you're wanted. I pulled into their neighborhood a little after 10. The house is a newer build on a cul-de-sac, cream-colored with dark shutters, a basketball hoop in the driveway that Marcus never uses anymore. There are 2 Japanese maples in the front yard that Megan planted the year they moved in. They were bare now. Just thin, dark branches against the gray November sky. Both cars were gone. I told myself they were probably just out. Grocery run, last-minute things before the holiday. I parked along the curb and sat for a moment. Checked my phone. No messages. I texted Daniel. "Just pulled up. Looks like you're out. No rush. I'll wait." I put a little exclamation point so it would seem cheerful and not like I was tracking him. I waited. 20 minutes. 30. I got out and stretched my back, walked to the front door, rang the bell just in case someone was inside and hadn't seen me pull up. Nothing. I tried calling Daniel. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I sat back down in my car. At 45 minutes, I called Megan's number. It rang twice and then cut to voicemail. That felt different from 4 rings. 2 rings means someone looked at the screen. I sat with that for a moment. There was a woman walking a golden retriever on the other side of the cul-de-sac. She waved at me. The neighborly kind of wave you give to someone you half recognize. I waved back. Then I got out of the car because sitting inside it was starting to feel like hiding. I walked up to the front door again. This time I noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under the welcome mat. The mat says, "Home is where the heart is," in faded navy letters. I had given them that mat as a housewarming gift. I remember picking it out, but I picked up the paper. It was a note card, cream-colored, Megan's handwriting. Neat, small letters, the kind of handwriting that looks controlled even when the message isn't. It said, "Lauren Daniels' Uncle Pete had a health scare, and we drove down to Chattanooga last night to be with the family. I didn't want to wake you with a call. The spare key is in the lockbox by the garage. Code is 1987. Make yourself at home. We'll be back Sunday. There's food in the fridge. Sorry for the mix-up. M." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, standing on their front porch on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, with my pecan pie in a bag in my car and my burgundy sweater folded on top of my suitcase. Make yourself at home. I stood there for a long moment. A car drove slowly through the cul-de-sac. The woman with the golden retriever had looped back around, and she slowed down when she saw me. The way people slow down when they sense something is wrong, even if they can't name it. I looked at the note again. 1987. The code to the lockbox was the year I got married. I wasn't sure if that meant something or nothing at all. I got the key. Inside, the house was clean and smelled like a plug-in air freshener, something called Autumn Harvest. The kitchen counters were bare. The living room had a basket of decorative gourds on the coffee table, the kind you buy at a craft store, a Thanksgiving decoration with no one home to celebrate. I put my pecan pie on the kitchen counter. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one I helped them pick out at a furniture store on Thompson Lane 3 years ago, and I looked at my phone. I had 2 bars of service. I looked at the last text I'd sent Daniel, just pulled up. "Looks like you're out, no rush, I'll wait." Still just delivered, not read. I thought about calling my friend Roberta back home in Knoxville. Roberta would know what to say. Roberta always knows what to say, usually something that sounds gentle but lands hard, like a hand you weren't expecting on your shoulder. I didn't call her yet. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Instead, I unpacked my things into the guest room, which is at the end of the hall past the kids' doors, both closed. Someone had put a small towel and a washcloth on the foot of the bed. I didn't know if Megan had done that before they left, or if it had been there for weeks. The room felt unlived in the way guest rooms do, like a place that holds its breath between visitors. I sat on the edge of the bed. I am 67 years old. I raised Daniel alone for 4 of the most important years of his life after his father and I separated. I worked as a dental hygienist for 31 years. I bought my own house in 1999 with money I saved myself, dollar by dollar, skipping things I wanted so I could put something away. I am not a woman who falls apart easily, but I sat on that guest bed in my son's empty house, and I allowed myself, for exactly 3 minutes, to feel the full weight of what had happened. The call he made, the words he chose, "We want you here," the pie I baked, the drive, the welcome mat I gave them as a gift, the note in Megan's careful handwriting. 3 minutes. Then I stood up. I went back to the kitchen and I ate a slice of the cranberry orange bread I'd made for Lily. It was good. I make good bread. My mother taught me. Around noon, Daniel finally called back. He started talking before I could say anything. Uncle Pete, blood pressure, had to go, didn't think it would be a big deal. He talked fast the way people talk when they're hoping speed will carry them past the part where they have to sit still with something uncomfortable. I let him talk. When he stopped, I said, "Daniel, I drove 3 hours." He said, "I know, Mom. I'm sorry, but it was a family emergency." I said, "I am your family." There was a pause, a long one. Then he said, "You're going to be fine there for a few days. There's plenty of food. We'll be back Sunday, and we can celebrate then." I said, "Today is Wednesday." He said, "I know, Mom." I said, "Thanksgiving is tomorrow." He said, "I know that, Mom." And then neither of us said anything for a moment, And in that silence, I heard something I had been trying not to hear for a long time. Not cruelty, exactly. Something quieter than that. Something more like how a light dims so slowly you don't notice until the room is nearly dark. I told him I would talk to him later. I hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a while. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed on the street. I looked around at the house, their life arranged without me in it. Everything in its place. Nothing that needed me. I thought about leaving. I thought about it seriously. The way you turn an option over in your hands to see if it's real. I could load my car right now. Be back in Knoxville by 3. Sleep in my own bed. Feed my cat Hazel. Call Roberta and tell her everything. But something kept me. I'm not sure I can explain it clearly, even now. It wasn't hope that they'd come back. It wasn't the food in the fridge or the made-up guest bed. It was something older than that. Some part of me that still believed if I stayed, it would mean something. That leaving would be an ending I wasn't ready to write yet. So I stayed. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up before 6, the way I always do. Old habit from the years of early shifts. I lay in the guest room, listening to the neighborhood. Wake up. Someone's dog barking 2 streets over. A garbage truck, though I thought they didn't run on holidays. The refrigerator humming through the wall. I got up and made coffee with the coffee maker on their counter. A fancy one with a touchscreen that took me several minutes to figure out. While it brewed, I stood at the kitchen window and looked at the backyard. They have a bird feeder back there. One of those shepherd's hook ones. And there were 2 cardinals on it. A male and a female. The red one and the brown one, taking turns. I watched them for a long time. I called Roberta at 8 o'clock. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already up, which meant she was already at her kitchen table with her coffee, which is exactly where Roberta is every morning of her life. I told her everything. The call from Daniel, the drive, the note card, the code to the lockbox. Roberta was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm making coffee in my son's kitchen while he's in Chattanooga." She said, "That's not what I asked." I said, "No, I'm not entirely okay." She said, "That's Roberta. She doesn't give you pity. She gives you the next question." I said I didn't know yet. I said I was going to figure out what to do with the day and I'd call her later. She said, "You know you can drive back right now. Your house is still there. Hazel is fine. I'm feeding her. Come home if you want to come home." I said, "I know," but I didn't leave. I went to the grocery store instead. Small one, about a mile away. The kind with narrow aisles and a deli counter staffed by one woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on Thanksgiving morning. I wasn't the only one there. There were other people in the store, moving quietly, taking things off shelves with the particular efficiency of people who aren't cooking for anyone but themselves. I bought a small turkey breast, not a whole bird, the boneless kind that takes 2 hours. Some sweet potatoes, green beans, a bottle of white wine, and a bouquet of sunflowers from the bucket near the entrance because I wanted something alive and yellow in the house. When I got back to the car, I sat for a moment with the grocery bags on the passenger seat and the sunflowers lying across the dash, and I thought, I am going to make myself a Thanksgiving dinner. In my son's kitchen, by myself. And it is going to be good, because I am a good cook, and no one can take that from me. That is what I thought, and I meant it. Back at the house, I started cooking around 10. Peeled the sweet potatoes. Seasoned the turkey breast the way I always do, butter and sage and a little lemon zest under the skin. Put the sunflowers in a mason jar on the counter. Opened the white wine at 11:30 because it was a holiday, and I was alone in my son's house, and the wine was cold, and there are some things you just do. At noon, someone knocked on the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, and standing on the front porch was a woman I'd never met. She looked to be in her late 50s, silver hair pulled back, a casserole dish covered in foil in her hands. She looked at me with a kind of warm uncertainty, like she'd been expecting someone else, but was willing to adjust. She said, "I'm Carol, from next door. I saw your car yesterday. I assumed you were Daniel's mom?" I said, "I am. I'm Lauren." She said, "I figured. He mentioned you might be visiting. I made too much sweet potato casserole. Are you alone in there?" I said, "I am." She didn't say anything pitying. She just held up the casserole dish a little higher and said, "Well, there's more than enough. Mind if I come in?" That is how I spent Thanksgiving with a stranger who brought sweet potato casserole and stayed for 4 hours. Carol had lived next door for 6 years. She'd known Daniel and Megan since they moved in. She was divorced, her own kids in Seattle and Atlanta, neither of them able to fly home this year. She'd planned to eat alone, too. She'd made the casserole out of habit, she said, because her hands needed something to do. We ate at the kitchen table. My turkey breast and green beans. Her casserole. My pecan pie. We talked the way people talk when they have nothing to prove to each other easily without performing anything. She told me about her years teaching middle school English. I told her about 31 years looking inside people's mouths and knowing more about their anxiety levels than their therapists did. We laughed about that. She had a dog named Biscuit, a beagle mix, and she texted her son-in-law to let him bring Biscuit over, and so the afternoon ended with a beagle asleep across my feet under the table while Carol and I finished the wine and watched the parade rerun on television. When she left at 5, she said, "This was the best Thanksgiving I've had in 3 years." I said, "Me too." And I meant that too. Daniel called that evening. He sounded tired, the way people sound when they've been in a hospital waiting room for too long, the fluorescent light kind of tired. Uncle Pete was stable. They were planning to drive back Saturday instead of Sunday. He said he hoped I was doing okay. I said, "I'm fine." He said, "Mom." I said, "Daniel, I need you to hear me say something, and I need you to actually hear it." He was quiet. I said, "I drove 3 hours because you told me you wanted me there. I baked 2 things. I packed a bag. I arranged my life around being with my family on a holiday, and you left me a note card under the welcome mat." He said, "Uncle Pete." I said, "I know about Uncle Pete. I'm not talking about Pete. I'm talking about what it costs me to rearrange myself for you, and whether that cost matters to you at all." He didn't say anything. I said, "I love you. And I am going to drive home Saturday morning. And when you're ready to talk about this, not to explain it, to actually talk about it, I'm here. But I'm not available to be fit in around everything else. Not anymore." He said, "Mom," I said, "Good night, Daniel." And I hung up. Not with anger exactly. With something steadier than anger. Something I hadn't quite felt in a long time. A feeling that takes a while to grow back after years of making yourself smaller. Saturday morning, I packed my car, put the mason jar with the remaining sunflowers on the kitchen counter yellow, still open, still alive. Left a note of my own on the kitchen table. Just one line. I was here. Then I drove home. Hazel was waiting at the door, which is what cats do when they have decided you are theirs. They act inconvenienced by your absence while making it absolutely clear they noticed. I sat down on the kitchen floor and let her walk across my lap for a while because sometimes that is the right thing to do after a long week. Roberta came over that evening with soup, the kind with the big white beans and kale that she makes from her mother's recipe. We sat at my kitchen table and I told her everything. Carol and the casserole, the beagle across my feet, the phone call with Daniel, what I said to him. Roberta listened without interrupting, which takes effort for her and which I appreciate. When I finished, she said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Like myself." For the first time in a while, she said, "Good." We ate the soup. We talked about other things. The winter she's planning to spend in Savannah with her sister. The book I'm reading, a novel about a woman who buys a house in Portugal at 65 and learns to make ceramic tiles. The way November light falls through my kitchen window at 5 o'clock, pale and thin and particular to this season. It has been 3 weeks now. Daniel called again 10 days after I got home. He didn't call to explain. He called to say he was sorry. Not sorry, but not sorry, however, just sorry. He said he knew it wasn't right. He said that Megan and he had talked and that there were things they needed to do differently. He didn't tell me what those things were, and I didn't ask. That conversation is for the two of them to figure out. I told him I loved him. I told him I wanted to see him and the grandchildren, and that I was willing to try again. But I told him something else too. I said, Daniel, I am not available to be an afterthought. I have a life I love. People who are glad when I arrive. Things I'm good at. I will show up for you, but you have to show up for me too. That's not an ultimatum. That's just the truth about how this works. He said he understood. I don't know yet if he does. Some things take longer to understand than they take to say. But the door is open. My door has always been open. Carol texted me last week. She's going to be up in Knoxville for a conference in January, something related to the school district she consults with now. She asked if I wanted to meet for lunch. I said yes, immediately. I said bring Biscuit if he's allowed. She said she'd see what she could do. I have been thinking a lot lately about the word invisible, about how it doesn't always happen all at once. It's not usually someone who looks at you and decides you don't matter. More often, it's a long accumulation of small choices, skipped calls, rescheduled visits, invitations that get walked back, holidays that quietly stop including you, and you accommodate each one because you love them, because you understand that people are busy, because you don't want to be the one who makes things difficult. And somewhere in all that accommodating, you can start to disappear to yourself. I don't want to do that anymore. I am 67 years old. I have a cat who waits at the door. I have a friend who brings soup. I have a kitchen where things smell good when I cook, which is most days. I have a book about a woman in Portugal making tiles, and I have been reading it slowly because I don't want it to end. I have a cranberry orange bread recipe that Lily will inherit someday if she wants it, and I have a notebook where I write down what my grandchildren tell me they love because I am the kind of grandmother who pays attention. I am not a backup plan. I am not a side story, something that happens while the real story goes on somewhere else. I am not available to sit alone in a guest room waiting for my family to come back and need me. I drove 3 hours to spend Thanksgiving with people who love me. And in the end, I did. It just turned out that one of them brought a casserole from next door, and the other one had 4 paws and bad manners around table scraps. That counts. All of it counts. If you are out there tonight, feeling like you've been moved to the edge of someone else's life, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to name it. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen to make the people you love feel better about doing it. You can be gentle and honest at the same time. You can keep the door open and still have a line. And you can make yourself a full Thanksgiving dinner in an empty house and have it be one of the best meals you've ever eaten. Because you brought the pie. You always bring the pie. Take care of yourselves out there. And if no one has told you today, I'm glad you're here.